reference to, okay, the whole Day of Atonement has happened, and now he offers a burnt offering. And what I want this conversation to be is, what is a burnt offering, and what is that pointing us to? So I'll give you, or if you have questions, you're free to ask your questions before we start. If you want to be turning over to Leviticus 1, anything that you want to say before I get rolling on the burnt offerings? Would somebody please read this for us? Sorry about this. I'm going to give you the exciting reading. Would somebody read Leviticus 1 and verses 3 through 9? Okay. So, this is what I would highlight for the burnt offering. If you want to have something to remember, what's going on with the burnt offering and what makes this different and special from all of the other offerings, we'll read verses 8 and 9, but really verse 9 is what I'm looking at. Aaron's sons, the priest, shall arrange the pieces, the head, the fat, on the wood that is on the fire on the altar, but its entrails and its legs he shall wash with water. And this is the part that I would highlight. And the priest shall burn all of it on the altar as a burnt offering, a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And so look down at verse 13. What do you do if you, in verse 10 it says, okay, so that was, what if you take it from the herd? Verse 10, what if you take it from the flock? But verse 13 is the same thing. The entrails, the legs shall wash with water, and the priest shall offer all of it on the altar of burnt offering. And so the thing that is different from the burnt offering from every other sacrifice is, you take this animal and you just burn the whole thing. In all of the other sacrifices, you slaughter the animal and the priest gets these parts. And this is how the priests eat. This is their payment. You make a sacrifice, I get this part. We're going to sacrifice this part. In some of the sacrifices, I get to take some of the sacrifice home myself. Here's my sacrifice to God. I get some of it. The priest gets some of it. With the burnt offering, though, the whole thing goes. There's a later passage. This is only because it's going to bother me if I don't say it. Except the skin. You don't burn its skin. The skin goes to the priest. But the idea on this one is the whole thing goes. So what's our picture here? Why? How about this question? Why does the Day of Atonement end with a burnt offering for the priest and a burnt offering for the people?
Because it's like the final act that completes this whole process of restoring with God. And like in verse 9 for a sin offering, like to me that makes me think of verses in the New Testament that when they talk about Jesus and how he was offered up for our sin. So I believe this is pointing again towards Jesus and that he's completed the picture. And prior get all these people trying to do bits and pieces, and, it wasn't complete until Jesus came.
Yeah. Let me throw these up for you. I went through and read the articles in the dictionaries. I read the articles on burnt offering, and look at some of the highlights for the burnt offering. The complete consecration of the offerer and his gift is intended by this symbolical ritual. I'm going to burn the whole thing. What is that symbolizing? The complete, I'm going to consecrate to set apart as holy to the Lord. I'm going to consecrate the whole thing. Or a burnt offering involves the complete burning of an animal or other offering on an altar as an act of worship and surrender to God. Here you go, God. You get the whole thing. Or how about this one? These offerings signified the complete dedication of the offerers unto God. Or how about this one? This is the last one. By entering the forecourt of the temple or tabernacle wherein the Lord was believed to dwell, the worshiper literally presented himself before the Lord as an expression of surrender or dedication. The significance of the total consumption of the sacrificial animal was to destroy totally the sins of the presenter. I like that one the best. Here's the whole Day of Atonement. Let's take care of sins. And now we're going to finish with a burnt offering, which is all of these points put together that we've been looking at. I'm going to wash, and now, God, and now that you've taken care of my sins, you get all of me. There's none of me left over. You get all of it. And I think this is, if you have that picture in mind, this is where I'm going to go to Romans 12. Ryan, I pointed to this earlier. This is the last thing that I have to say, so you can have the last word after this. This is where I think you have to have this imagery in your head. And when you come to Romans chapter 12 and verse 1, Paul says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. So the idea is, Jesus has cleansed me of my sin, and so what's next? Next, I say to God, here I am, all of me. I'm yours now. It's all for you. Does that make sense? Do those 5 points help with, okay, after atonement, what's the significance of all the things that we're seeing? Are we good on the picture and the meaning? Or any other comments that you'd like to make? Well, the idea is going to be this. The goat carried our sins out there. So if you want to take something away from this class, it would be a renewal. A time for us to look at our lives and say, okay, here was old Ryan. Jesus carried my sins outside the camp. Now my sins need to stay out there. They can't come back. I don't baptize the old man and leave a little string tied to the piece that I don't want to give up so I can pull it back up out of the water and play with it every once in a while. It's gone. It's burned up, totally burned up. It's washed off. I'm a new person now, wholly dedicated to God and His service. I think every single person in this room, no matter where you are on your walk with the Lord, early or late, this class is something for all of us to say, my sin needs to stay out there. It can't be a part of this. You can have the last word, and then we're done. Yep, Ian?
Just like Egyptian history, when the Egyptians were in bondage to the Israelites, before we were Christians, we were in bondage to Satan, and we did what Satan wanted. But now we can't serve two masters.
I love that idea. And I combine it with Ryan's comment earlier, the Day of Jubilee. Yes, now I'm free. No, you're not. You are completely burned up and totally dedicated to God and his service. I've gone from being slave to sin to slave of Jesus. All right. Well, thank you for your comments this morning. I appreciate it. And next week will be our last class on the Day of Atonement. So if you have any difficult questions that I could not answer for the Day of Atonement, next Sunday morning is the time for you to bring those questions to class.